Joshua 23 is where we are. We're going to finish the last two chapters. The first two verses of Joshua 23. Now it came about after many days when Yahweh had given rest to Israel from all their enemies on every side. And Joshua was old, advanced in years, that Joshua called for all Israel, for their elders and their heads and their judges and their officers, and said to them, I am old, advanced in years. So we got Joshua here. He's an old man. And his message is going to be similar to the last message of Moses that he gave to the people. Verses 3 and 4. You have seen all that Yahweh your Elohim has done to all these nations because of you. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who has been fighting for you. See, I have apportioned to you these nations which remain as an inheritance for your tribes, with all the nations which I've cut off, from the Jordan even to the great sea toward the setting of the sun. Well, Israel has personally witnessed how Elohim has delivered them and fought for them. He's also given them the land that he promised to give them. And what he's doing here, Elohim is fulfilling his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The covenant will be permanently fulfilled when Yeshua returns and we reign with him in Israel. Now you got to keep in mind, this is what the kingdom of heaven is. It's really the kingdom from heaven. This kingdom is going to be, it's the land of Israel, okay? When Messiah returns, that's going to be the kingdom that will reign over the earth. And we read about it in so many places in Scripture. We have Isaiah 2, starting at verse 2. Now it will come about in the last days, the mountain of the house of Yahweh will be established as the chief of the mountains, and will be raised above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. And many peoples will come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of Yahweh, to the house of the Elohim of Jacob, that he may teach us concerning his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For the Torah will go forth from Zion, and the word of Yahweh from Jerusalem. Now, I know a lot of Christians don't care about his ways and his Torah. They don't care about that land of Israel. Some do. They think it's good to root for the Jews. You know, it's a good thing. But I don't think they realize that is the kingdom, okay? That land over there is the kingdom. That at the resurrection, that's going to be the consummation of that promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's what that's going to be. And the Torah is going to go forth from Jerusalem. And that's where Yeshua is going to reign from. Continuing there, and he'll judge between the nations and render decisions for many peoples. And they'll hammer their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not lift up sword against nation, and never again will they learn war. Come, house of Jacob, let us walk in the light of Yahweh. Staying in Isaiah, go to chapter 11, starting at verse 9. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain. For the earth will be full of the knowledge of Yahweh as the water covers the sea. Then it will come about in that day that the nations will resort to the root of Jesse, who will stand as a signal for the peoples, and his resting place will be glorious. Then it will happen on that day that Adonai will again recover the second time with his hand the remnant of his people who will remain from Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, Shinar, Hamath, and the islands of the sea. And he'll lift up a standard for the nations, and will assemble the banished ones of Israel, and will gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. Excuse me. In Isaiah 66, starting at verse 20. Then they shall bring all your brethren from all the nations as a grain offering to Yahweh, on horses and chariots, in litters, on mules, and on camels, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, says Yahweh. Just as the sons of Israel bring their grain offering in a clean vessel to the house of Yahweh, I will also take some of them for priests and for Levites, says Yahweh. Just as the new heavens and the new earth, which I make, will endure before me, declares Yahweh, so your offspring and your name will endure. And it will be from new moon to new moon, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all mankind will come to bow down before me, says Yahweh. So, we may as well start practicing acknowledging him in his Sabbaths and his new moons, because we're going to be doing it for eternity. In Daniel 2, verse 35, it says, "Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all crushed. Were crushed all at the same time, and became like chaff from the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." What's a mountain again in prophecy? What's symbolic of? Kingdom. That's right. That kingdom will fill the whole earth. Skipping down to verse 44. We read, "In the days of those kings, the Elohim of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed. And that kingdom will not be left for another people. It'll crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever." Yeah. The feet was iron mixed with clay. And a head of gold. Yeah, all the nations. Yeah, all those will be destroyed. Daniel 7, verse 14 says, "And to him was given dominion, glory, and a kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and men of every language might serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which will not pass away, and his kingdom is one which will not be destroyed." And then skipping down to verse 18, "But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come." Also in Zechariah 8, verses 3 through 5, "Thus says Yahweh, I will return to Zion and will dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. Then Jerusalem will be called the city of truth, and the mountain of the Yahweh of hosts will be called the holy mountain." Why do you think it'll be called the city of truth? What did we just read in Isaiah? What's going to come forth from Zion? The Torah. "Thus says the Yahweh of hosts, old men and old women will again sit at the streets of Jerusalem, each man with his staff in his hand because of age, and the streets of the city will be filled with boys and girls playing in the streets." Revelation 11, verse 15 says, "And the seventh angel sounded, and there arose loud voices in the heavens, saying, The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Adonai and of his Messiah, and he will reign forever and ever." Also Isaiah 27, verse 13, "It will come about also in that day that a great trumpet will be blown, and those who were perishing in the land of Assyria and who were scattered in the land of Egypt will come and worship Yahweh in the holy mountain at Jerusalem." Jerusalem, very important, very important. The land over there is very important. That's where Elohim says his eyes are always there. Going back to Joshua 23, verses 5 and 6. "And Yahweh your Elohim, he shall thrust them out from before you and drive them from before you, and you shall possess their land just as Yahweh your Elohim promised you. Be very firm then to keep and do all that is written in the book of the Torah of Moses, so that you may not turn aside from it to the right hand or to the left." Now Joshua is telling the people, you are to do all that was written in the Torah of Moses. Everything. Deuteronomy 5, verses 32 and 33. You shall observe to do just as Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you. You shall not turn aside to the right or to the left. You shall walk in all the way which Yahweh your Elohim has commanded you, that you may live, that it may be well with you, that you may prolong your days in the land which you shall possess. Deuteronomy 12, verse 32, "Whatever I command you, you shall be careful to do. You shall not add to nor take away from it." He says, don't turn to the right or to the left. Interesting way to put it. Deuteronomy 28, 14, "And do not turn aside from any of the words which I command you today, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods, to serve them." Proverbs 4, verses 26 and 27. "Watch the path of your feet, and all your ways will be established. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Turn your foot from evil." Isaiah 1, starting at verse 16. "Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from my sight. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice, reprove the ruthless, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. Come now, let us reason together, says Yahweh. Though your sins are as scarlet, they'll be white as snow. Though they're red like crimson, they'll be like wool. Once we understand what Scripture means by certain words, what evil means. What is evil? It's not just that neighbor who keeps stealing your newspaper. Evil is breaking his Torah. It's going against his Torah. That's what it is. When it says to do good, what does that mean? Good is what Elohim says it is. Okay? He defines what's good and what isn't. You know, and he says, don't go to the right or to the left. And why did John the Baptist come? Well, yeah, to make full the prophecy and to be Elijah who was to come, but there was a problem with the way the Torah was being taught in that day. You know what they were doing? They were going to the right and then they're going to the left. Then they're going over hills and down in valleys and they're going this way and then that, and you can't get from here to there because of the way they were distorting the Torah. So, we read in Matthew 3, the first 3 verses. Now in those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea, saying, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. For this is the one referred to by Isaiah the prophet, saying, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, make ready the way of Yahweh, make his paths straight. Okay? Because they were, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes had distorted his Torah, and they were going in all directions, but they weren't going straight. That's what John was preparing. They had deviated from that. They deviated from the path. Going back to Joshua 23, verses 7 and 8. In order that you may not associate with these nations, these which remain among you, or mention the name of their gods, or make anyone swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them. But you are to cling to Yahweh your Elohim, just as you have done to this day. You know, Joshua tells the people to hold fast or cling to Yahweh. And that obviously means keep his word. Okay? That's what it means. Verse 9, for Yahweh has driven out great and strong nations from before you. And as for you, no man has stood before you to this day. One of your men puts to flight 1,000. For Yahweh your Elohim is he who fights for you, just as he promised you. So take diligent heed to yourselves to love Yahweh your Elohim. To love Yahweh your Elohim is of the utmost importance. And it's not an emotion. Okay? We read in Exodus 20, starting at verse 4. You shall not make for yourself an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them. For I, Yahweh your Elohim, am a jealous Elohim, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me, and showing loving kindness to the thousands, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So that's how we love him. That's how we show that we love him, by keeping his commandments. Romans 8 verse 28 says, and we know that Elohim causes all things to work together for good to those who love Elohim, to those who are called according to his purpose. Once again, how do you love him? Keep his commandments. That's how it's done. Verses 12 and 13. For if you ever go back and cling to the rest of these nations, these which remain among you, and intermarry with them, so that you associate with them and they with you, know with certainty that Yahweh your Elohim will not continue to drive these nations out from before you. But they shall be a snare and a trap to you, and a whip on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from off this good land, which Yahweh your Elohim has given to you. Well, he says, don't act like the world around you. You can't do that. We're told as followers of Messiah the same thing. Don't be like the world. 1 John 2, verses 16 and 17. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away and also its lusts. But the one who does the will of Elohim abides forever. Joshua 23, look at verse 14. Now behold, today I'm going the way of all the earth. And you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one word of all the good words which Yahweh your Elohim has spoken concerning you has failed. All have been fulfilled for you. Not one of them has failed. Not one word what Elohim told them failed. And it's the same way today. Luke 21, verse 33 says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Back to Joshua 23, verses 15 and 16. It shall come about that just as all the good words which Yahweh your Elohim spoke to you have come upon you, so Yahweh will bring upon you all the threats until he has destroyed you from off this good land which Yahweh your Elohim has given you. When you transgress the covenant of Yahweh your Elohim, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of Yahweh will burn against you, and you shall perish quickly from off the good land which he has given you. Well, the people weren't able to keep their part of the covenant. A new covenant was needed, and that's what happened later. Chapter 24, verse 1. Then Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem and called for the elders of Israel and for their heads and their judges and their officers, and they presented themselves before Yahweh. Okay, so Joshua now, he's at the end of his life. He gathers, he gathers the tribes of Israel at Shechem, which is interesting. It says there they presented themselves before Elohim. The temple, though, was in Shiloh, which is about 15 miles away. It's south of Shechem. I don't know why Joshua didn't go to Shiloh to present the leaders before Yahweh, but he didn't. He may not have been able at this time. Verses 2 and 3, and Joshua said to all the people, thus says Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel, from ancient times your fathers lived beyond the river, namely Terah, the father of Abraham, and the father of Nahor, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led him through all the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. You know, apparently at one time, Abraham was an idol worshiper. It wasn't until Elohim called him at age 70 to be the father of many nations. Verse 4, and to Isaac I gave Jacob and Esau, and to Esau I gave Mount Seir to possess it, but Jacob and his sons went down to Egypt. You know, this is almost worded to where it looks like Esau's the one that's blessed and Jacob is the one that's cursed, but that's not the way it is. The children of Jacob, or Israel, had to go through the agony of slavery in order to be a part of the plan and blessings of Elohim. It was all part of it. Verse 5, then I sent Moses and Aaron, I plagued Egypt by what I did in its midst, and afterward I brought you out. And I brought your fathers out of Egypt, and you came to the sea, and Egypt pursued your fathers with chariots and horsemen to the Red Sea. But when they cried out to Yahweh, he put darkness between you and the Egyptians, and brought the sea upon them and covered them. And your eyes saw what I did in Egypt, and you lived in the wilderness for a long time. Yeah.
Was Daniel and Jacob that spoke in Israel together before
No.
freedom? We said no.
Okay, now Daniel, he's a lot later.
Later.
Yeah.
We said it.
Where?
Well, go back.
Jacob and Esau.
Okay, yeah. And anyway, Jacob went to Egypt
That's when he sent Moses and Aaron. He sent Moses and Aaron, and then he plagued Egypt by what he did there.
Well, he sent Moses and Aaron before Daniel ever showed up.
Daniel's, he's 1,000 years later. No problem. Okay, verse 8. Then I brought you into the land of the Amorites who lived beyond the Jordan, and they fought with you, and I gave them into your hand. And you took possession of their land when I destroyed them before you. Then Balak, the son of Zippor, king of Moab, arose and fought against Israel, and he sent and summoned Balaam, the son of Beor, to curse you. But I was not willing to listen to Balaam, so he had to bless you, and I delivered you from his hand. You know, you see this several times. Elohim goes back and he tells them the history again about how he provided for them, how he fought for them, how he delivered them, how he did so many things for them. And he's just reminding them. He delivered them from the Amorites and from Balak, the king of the Moabites. Balak thought he could get Balaam to curse that land, but Elohim wouldn't let it happen. He showed who's in control. Elohim is in control. Verse 11. When you crossed the Jordan and came to Jericho, and the citizens of Jericho fought against you, and the Amorite, and the Perizzite, and the Canaanite, and the Hittite, the Girgashite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Thus I gave them into your hand. Elohim delivered all their enemies into their hand. Those opposing Israel did not stand. Verse 12, then I sent the hornet before you, and it drove out the two kings of the Amorites from before you, but not by your sword or your bow. See, he drove them out using hornets. Now, I can't think of a worse way to be driven somewhere than by a bunch of hornets. That would stink. But he did it in several cases. In Exodus 23, verse 28, I'll send hornets ahead of you. He said that was going to happen. They may drive out the Hivites, the Canaanites, and the Hittites before you. In Deuteronomy 7:20, moreover, Yahweh your Elohim will send the hornet against them, until those who are left and hide themselves from you perish. So you can't hide from them hornets. They'll find you. Okay, they're no fun. It's no fun at all. Verse 13. And I gave you a land which you had not labored, and cities which you had not built, and you've lived in them. You are eating of vineyards and olive groves, which you did not plant. You know, this picture of the conquest of the land is one we shouldn't miss. Remember when they went into the land and they said, well, we'll bring you back, bring us back samples of what the land's like. Remember they had the grapes that couldn't, it took several guys to carry it. There were so many of them, so many grapes on the vines. And keep in mind, they just inherited all this. Land flowing with milk and honey, food everywhere. And what do you think those homes were like there? What do you think those homes were like? These people lived there. Oh, they got luxury townhouses, folks. Those were nice places, okay? They weren't shacks. They weren't shacks. And they got to just move right in. You got cities. Oh, nice city. Well, it's yours now. Well, thank you. Never had a city before. Yeah, and the hornets are all gone. They're chasing them guys that are running over that hill way over there. Yeah, hornet free. You know, it's the same thing with with each one of us. You know, Elohim doesn't choose us because we did anything great. It's just because we're chosen, okay? Wasn't anything we earned. These people didn't earn that. He just chose them to have it. It's a free gift. Verse 14, and now therefore fear Yahweh and serve him in sincerity and truth. And put away the gods which your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve Yahweh. Well, the command from Joshua, very straightforward. Serve him in, it says in sincerity and truth. What does that mean? How do you serve in truth? Well, truth serve him in truth, his word is truth. Okay? Yeshua said that. Serve him in truth. What that means is serve him according to his instructions that he gives us in his word. That's how we are to serve him. Psalm 119, verse 160. The sum of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous ordinances is everlasting. I don't know how to argue that. I don't know how you parse words to make that look like that the Torah has gone away. Yeah, it's one of the references you were talking about. I knew it was. John 17:17. Sanctify them in the truth. Your word is truth. That's what it is. That is just, you want... Scripture sometimes will define things for us. Give us just direct definitions. Definition of truth, his word. Definition of sin, lawlessness. Lawlessness. Definition of love, keep his commandments. That's very straightforward stuff. Well, this is the meaning of that command. Serve him according to the truth that's in his word. You see, the world wants to serve him to where they feel good about it. I want to feel good about it. Okay? It's me. It's all about me. That's what makes me feel good. I want to sing some good songs. It makes me feel good. Okay? Yeah. Right. It's a personal, yes, it's me. One-on-one, yes. Personal relationship. No, see, how can you have a personal relationship with someone who doesn't even know you? And he says, if you don't obey his Torah, I don't even know you. I don't know anything about you. Get out of here. Hear that weeping and gnashing of teeth out there where it's real dark? Whoop, whoop, get out there. Yeshua used very similar terminology when speaking of how we should worship Elohim. He said in John 4, starting in verse 23, but an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. And it really means in life, okay, and in truth. For such people, the Father seeks to be his worshipers. Elohim is life. And those who worship him must worship in life and in truth. Once again, I want to get away from the ghosts. Okay, we don't, no such thing as ghosts. All right. Casper's not real. Casper nowadays is a mattress. I have one. Okay. It's not a friendly ghost. The friendliest ghost we know. No such thing. Verse 15. I love this verse. And if it is disagreeable in your sight to serve Yahweh, choose for yourselves today whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you're living. But as for me and my house, we'll serve Yahweh. What is he saying here? How, excuse me, how are we to serve him? What did he say? In truth, which is what? According to the way he says to worship him. Okay? According to the way he says to worship him. And Joshua says here, if that's disagreeable to you, then choose who you're going to serve. The gods your fathers served, which were beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you're living. Which one's it going to be? Okay? If you're not going to choose to serve him his way, then which of these fake gods you're going to serve? Pick one.
Doesn't Job say something similar to that? That's for me and my household.
Who?
Job. Doesn't Job say something?
Elijah does.
Oh, yeah.
In 1 Kings 18, verse 21. And Elijah came near to all the people and said, how long will you hesitate between two opinions? If Yahweh is Elohim, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. But the people did not answer him a word. Is that the one you're thinking of? Yeah. That's the one I was thinking of when I'm putting this together. He said, need to make a choice. See, the choice you don't have is to serve him the way you want to. That's not one of the choices. You either serve him the way he says to, in his word, which is very plain, or pick you a God out there. Start worshiping him. You can do that your way if you want. Any way you want. Yeah. There you go. The scriptures say if it seems evil in your eyes to serve Yahweh instead of disagreeable in Joshua 24:15. Yeah. And what are we told in Christianity about following the Torah? No. You will go to hell for that. Which I've never understood that. That never made a lick of sense to me. Don't you dare do what God says, you'll go to hell. You need to do what he says not to do. Then you'll go to heaven. Because then you're not trying to earn your way to heaven. There. Now, how's that for Logic 101? Christian Logic 101. Yeah, it didn't make a lick of sense, but, you are disagree, you have little faith. You have little faith. You're losing your faith. Everybody pray for Cliff. He needs more faith. He's doubting the word.
Well, they're not stupid enough to say it the way you just said it, because that
No, they say it different, but that's the meaning. That's exactly the meaning. Now, you can't say it the way it really is, then it sounds really stupid. Doesn't it? Well, how seriously does Elohim intend for us to take his Torah? How seriously? You know, he means to obey it with everything we have. Psalm 119, verse 106, I have sworn, and I will confirm that I will keep your righteous ordinances. Skipping down to verse 111, I have inherited your testimonies forever, for they're the joy of my heart. I've inclined my heart to perform your statutes forever, even to the end. I hate those who are double-minded, but I love your Torah. The psalmist. The psalmist.
well, I'm well aware of that, but somebody saying who's I is what I want to know.
It needs to be any one of his people.
Okay, I got it.
Yep. You know, how could the psalmist say, I've sworn that I'll keep all your righteous ordinances? How can the psalmist, you know why he could say that? Because those righteous ordinances are the joy of his heart. Because his heart is inclined to it. His heart is inclined to it. And he loves his Torah. Going back to Joshua 24, verses 16 and 17. And the people answered and said, far be it from us that we should forsake Yahweh to serve other gods. For Yahweh our Elohim is he who brought us and our fathers up out of the land of Egypt, from the house of bondage, and who did these great signs in our sight, and preserved us through all the way in which we went, and among all the peoples through whose midst we passed. The people confirm the words of Joshua. They agree to follow Elohim and obey him. Verse 18. And Yahweh drove out from before us all the peoples, even the Amorites who lived in the land. We also served Yahweh, for he is our Elohim. Then Joshua said to the people, you will not be able to serve Yahweh, for he is a holy Elohim. He is a jealous Elohim. He will not forgive your transgression or your sins. If you forsake Yahweh and serve other gods, then he'll turn and do you harm and consume you after he's done good to you. You know, Joshua's response here is intended to convey the unique character of Elohim. If they're not serious about following him, their words are not going to do them any good. Elohim will not forgive the unrepentant man. In Exodus 23, verse 21, be on your guard before him and obey his voice. Do not be rebellious toward him, for he will not pardon your transgression, since my name is in him. Exodus 34, verse 7, he who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity and transgression and sin, yet he will by no means leave the guilty unpunished, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children and on the grandchildren to the third and fourth generation. 2 Chronicles 36, verse 16, but they continually mocked the messengers of Elohim, despised his words, scoffed at his prophets, until the wrath of Yahweh arose against his people, until there was no remedy. Isaiah 27, verse 11. When its limbs are dry, they're broken off. Women come and make fire with them. For they are not a people of discernment. Therefore their Maker will not have compassion on them, and their Creator will not be gracious to them. And he especially hates idolatrous practices. Yeah. Don't take my kindness as a weakness, right? 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 Verses 21 and 22, and the people said to Joshua, no, but we'll serve Yahweh. And Joshua said to the people, you are witnesses against yourselves, that you've chosen for yourselves Yahweh to serve him. And they said, we are witnesses. Well, they've been sufficiently informed and sufficiently warned. You know, it's no different today. It's no different today. Everyone's been sufficiently informed and sufficiently warned. Verses 23 and 24. Now therefore put away the foreign gods which are in your midst, and incline your hearts to Yahweh, the Elohim of Israel. And the people said to Joshua, we will serve Yahweh our Elohim, and we will obey his voice. The people reaffirmed the covenant they made with Elohim. Verse 25, so Joshua made a covenant with the people that day and made for them a statute and an ordinance in Shechem. And Joshua wrote these words in the book of the Torah of Yahweh. And he took a large stone and set it up there under the oak that was by the sanctuary of Yahweh. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, the stone shall be a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of Yahweh which he spoke to us. Thus it shall be for a witness against you, lest you deny your Elohim. The people proclaim this stone as a witness against them if they disobey Elohim. Joshua does not want them to misunderstand this covenant they're making. He wants them to fully understand the covenant and the ramifications of breaking it. Verse 28, then Joshua dismissed the people, each to his inheritance. And it came about after these things that Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of Yahweh, died, being 110 years old. And they buried him in the territory of his inheritance in Timnath-Serah, which is in the hill country of Ephraim, on the north of Mount Gash. Well, the book of Joshua ends with three burials: Joseph, Joshua, and Eleazar. And these are not sad deaths. They're buried in the promised land. They're buried in that land that's the kingdom. They're awaiting the resurrection. Joshua lived the same number of years that Joseph did. Verse 31, and Israel served Yahweh all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who survived Joshua, and had known all the deeds of Yahweh which he had done for Israel. Now they buried the bones of Joseph, which the sons of Israel brought up from Egypt at Shechem, in the piece of ground which Jacob had bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. And they became the inheritance of Joseph's sons. Now, remember what happened to Joseph? Remember, he was second in command in Egypt. All right, and all his family came there because of the drought. The famine was so bad. And they lived there. And Joseph died in Egypt. What did he say before he died? Take me home. Make sure I get buried in the land of my fathers. Yes. So, how long later is this now? How long were they in Egypt in captivity? 400 years. 400 years. It's a long, long time. And they wandered in the wilderness for how long? 40? That's a long time. So, we're talking 440 plus years that his bones now are finally getting laid to rest where they promised they would bury him. Verse 33, and Eleazar the son of Aaron died, and they buried him at Gibeah of Phinehas his son, which was given to him in the hill country of Ephraim. You know, faithfulness to Yeshua and obedience to Elohim does not shield us from physical death, but it does give us hope for eternity. And Joseph and Joshua and Eleazar knew that. Any questions on Joshua?